I'd like to thank very much the Positive Farmers team for inviting me to speak today, and also for you to sit and listen to me. I know it's the end of the day, so people are probably anxious to enjoy themselves. But I'd also like to thank the people who spoke this morning and during the afternoon, because they really hit home on many of the things that I would like to put across. And whether you're talking about soil management or health in your herd, whatever it is you're talking about in farming, you're fundamentally talking about that you require people to be able to implement those strategies. And that's what I'm here to talk about. My title is Managing and Motivating People. And I'm going to go a slightly different way, a slightly different track in terms of that. And that's what I was charged to speak with, if you like. But when we're talking about motivating and managing people, it's very, very easy to be outward focused and think, what can I do for the people who are on my business? How can I look outwards? I'm privileged to work across many, many sectors. I'm probably here today because I'm a dairy farmer's daughter, so I do know a little bit about cows. I certainly don't know anything near as much as I thought I did, given everything I heard today. But in terms of people management, the first place we really need to think about when we're looking at people management is you as the individual who's going to drive all of that. So managing people and motivating people, it is critical that you as the employer or the potential employer really understand yourself, and that's where we're going to go with today. People management is a skill, just like hoof trimming is a skill, soil management is a skill. This is all learnable stuff. What's interesting and the key difference here is that while farming and the technical aspect of farming has vastly changed in the last 10, 15, 50 years, people fundamentally have not changed. So that's a really interesting thing to remember when you're facing the black art that is people management. There's nothing new out there. This has all been really well tested. There's a lot of people stuff out there. Maybe you haven't been exposed to it because you're working away in your own farm units or in your own businesses, but there's a lot of information out there that is really, really useful and helpful. And it's just a matter of asking people, maybe consultants, going on the internet, going into bookshops and finding out about it. Because it's a big area, I've just taken some questions that I'm going to put up as more or less a model that you can walk away with. And I'll draw on some of the things that people have spoken about today in order to get some of my points across. So in terms of the motivation challenge, this is a really interesting challenge for everybody because there's a difference when we talk about motivation and commitment. Motivation is something that we consider transient concept in psychology, so it's emotionally based. So this morning, you mightn't have felt like coming to the Positive Farmers Conference because there was snow on the road and there was traffic. So you had that feeling, that emotion about it. Whereas you were committed to your dairy farming business, that's what got you here in the first place. Or maybe you committed the money that you paid to be here, for example. So there's a difference there between motivating and committing. And what you want as employers and potential employers is to create commitment within your team, to create commitment within you as an individual, and to create commitment with people who are working around you. However, if you understand people's emotions and feelings and needs at any one time, you're in a good place to generate that commitment. Okay? I think it's a little bit like Colin referred to, the shareholders' interests or motivations changed, and so 10 years later you may not have the same board of shareholders because their motivations have changed. What they're trying to do is maybe create a level of commitment that will keep people there longer, and one of the things is talking about profitability, and profitability gives you options. And if you've got options, you've got other things that you can do, and that's really, really useful. So I think it's critical, just in terms of the title of today's Motivating People, think about getting people to commit. That's the key thing. But you can do that by understanding how you can motivate people. In terms of being an employer, and this is really important as well, the one thing you can absolutely control is yourself. You cannot control anybody else. But what you can do is control yourself. So in terms of expansion, and that's the critical question today, isn't it? How can you expand in a healthy manner? It is about reflecting on yourself and not so much asking about what is the best employee, but rather asking yourself, how can I be the best employer? Because if you want to minimize risk in your business, you have got to be the best employer that you can be. You have got to attract the best employees in the gate, and that's going to minimize risk to your business. So it's a little bit more complicated than just saying, well, I need a lad for a bit of work. There's a bit more involved to it than that. And why do I say that? Because you wouldn't do that with a cow. You wouldn't just randomly bring a cow into your farm. You wouldn't randomly buy a piece of farm machinery. You would put time and effort into doing that. And the same goes for developing your people strategy within your business. Colin talks about creating internal capacity. So one of the ways you can really create internal capacity in terms of people management is being a super efficient employer yourself, addressing your own issues first, and then going out with the skill set that will get you the right person in the gate. So it's about creating that infrastructure before you get people in the door. And John Roach has talked about skill before scale. So hone up in your employee and your employer's skills in order to create that scale when you want to bring people in the door. So what are the kind of things that you want to do to get people to commit? Well, it's really, really important that you understand your business well enough to understand what kind of people you want in the door. So what do I need? What do I need when I'm looking for an employee? What do I need in my business? It could be that on assessment you realize, actually, I don't need an employee. I just need to make my current employees better, or I need to be more efficient as an individual myself. The next thing you want to find out about is, what can I offer? What is it that I can add value with? And we heard Kevin Lane speaking this morning about really getting brand value. How can you make that brand better? You as an employer are a brand, and you are getting out there to get the best people in the gate. In terms of expansion, in terms of dairy and the potential there, we've now created, which is kind of unusual across sectors at the moment, you've got a sector where, because of the potential to grow and to increase, the employee has leverage, not the employer. So you need to be, as employers who want to expand and expand well, you need to be attracting the right person in the gate, which means if you're desperate to get the right person in the gate, you're giving the employee leverage. So you need to look about how can you create the leverage yourself through things that you can offer. You have to ask about what you want, so what are your parameters in terms of what you want. You have to think about how you can fail, and you need to think about how you can succeed. Okay? So these are the things that we're going to look at in terms of the presentation of understanding what it is that will motivate people. One of the things about motivating people is if you don't know what you are about, it's very difficult to get somebody else to commit to that as well. Okay? So it's really, really important that you understand role clarity, and that is the key. If you look at job dissatisfaction in the workplace, its lack of role clarity is one of the highest causes of job dissatisfaction. So you attract somebody in the gate, they think they're coming into this wonderful farm, that they're going to be milking cows and having a great time on machinery, and they find out that they're measuring grass, they're doing things that they really don't want to do. If that happens, that is your fault for not clarifying what it is you want. You need to be very, very careful in creating clarity around the role in your business, because after all, you wouldn't just randomly take cows in the door, in the gate, you wouldn't take in machinery, you wouldn't just buy any old piece of land. You would investigate and you would find out about it. It is critical you do the same with people. Okay, especially in a community like in Ireland, where many people are employing people to come onto their land, into their family homes. You need to be very, very critical about what it is that you want in your individuals. I think this is a really, really interesting one in terms of the conflict between me as an owner and you as an employee. And it's about understanding your levels of tolerance in terms of expectations. Obviously, if you own and operate your own business, you have a far greater stake than anybody you bring in the gate. Nobody's going to want to work the hours that you do. Nobody's going to want to invest the time that you do unless you make it incredibly attractive for them to do that. So it's really about saying to yourself, are you being unrealistic? Do you expect too much? Maybe are you being hard on your current employees? Should you be revising how you're dealing with your current employees? And what is it that you will accept in terms of tolerance of commitment? Can you clearly define what you need them to achieve every single day, weekly, monthly? Okay? Do you know what is required every day in your business so that you don't have idle hands? One of the things people always say to me in the farming community is, but what if I don't have enough work? If you don't have enough work for somebody, you haven't planned. You haven't thought about what can be done. And that's your fault. That's not the employee's fault. That's your fault for not understanding what is required in your business at any one time. Okay? So this is really coming back to a self-reflection, which is about what am I doing that makes me a good employer? What could I do in the future that will make me a good employer? Can you define your performance standards? I guess it's a bit like the traffic light system in Nollaig's disease, where you have performance standards. What are you going to say is exceptional behaviour, and what is absolutely not tolerable in your business? And that's really critical. And of course, there's a legal aspect to that. But it's really important that you understand what performance standards you expect from the people who work with you. And then you need to think about, again, reflecting on your own position, what do I need to do differently to get the best out of my staff? Okay, or my potential staff. So is there something that you're doing at the moment that isn't effective in terms of getting the best out of your current staff? Or is there something you're doing that could inhibit you getting the most out of your potential staff? And often that's about self-reflection and development and getting some of those skills. So that comes back to acquiring those skills, informing yourself and knowing more about it. The next question we're looking at is, what can I offer? That's a really interesting one, because if you're going to expand and more people are going to be employed in the farming community, you're going to be very limited if you're just sticking to people who have farming experience. So you need to start looking outside the farming world. And actually, I think Colin gave a good example when he said there's only 2 members of the board, current board, who are farming specific. And that probably in a community like Ireland makes people panic. Well, like, they have no cow experience, they have no milking experience, I couldn't possibly have them to work for me. And I think that's a really limited way of thinking about it. Because first of all, if you bring in, I suppose it's a bit like bringing in the new dairy, the new animals into the yard, what are they bringing with them? But if you bring in a blank slate, you can create a person that you want exactly for your business. So there's a lot of potential in considering outside of the dairy market in terms of employment. There's a lot of potential in terms of what could you offer as a lifestyle that would make it attractive for people who've never set foot in a farm before to come and work with you. And you hear some really interesting stories about people, they've been accountants, they've been finance, they've worked in the city, and find that they want to get back to kind of a rural community, they want more a sense of support. So it's really about finding out what can you offer in the farming and a lifestyle that will make you more attractive than the next employer. And if you think about it, and if we look and reflect on the way maybe our parents worked and our grandparents worked, a lot of people are being shed from the farming community because they see perceived easier ways of earning money. So you can spend, every hour that God gave you working, or you could spend a few hours in front of a computer and make quite a lot more money. So it's about being able to tease out what can the farming community offer that makes it more attractive than that IT office, for example. And that's about you recognizing what you have. And from a farming background originally, but not being there now, it's a very attractive lifestyle if you learn to sell it in the right way, and that's about adding brand value, which is the add value aspect. What could you offer in the future? So maybe that you can say to somebody coming in the door, I can't give you an opportunity at the moment in terms of progression, but if things go the way I'm planning them to go and we expand, then there will be the opportunity to maybe make you a unit manager elsewhere, to maybe give you the option to buy in or to create some equity in the business. So it's very, very important that you understand what you may be able to offer in the future that could still be attractive enough now to get the right person in the gate. One of the points I'll make at the end, it is critical that you do not renege on those offers to the best of your ability, because you're going to lose a lot of trust and respect in terms of that. And also you need to be very aware of, if somebody comes in the gate and expects something from you, what might prevent you from fulfilling those potential offers, okay? So really, really important that you are doing a huge amount of reflection back on self. It's not just about, oh, well, they're a rubbish employee and this, that, and the other. If you've got a rubbish employee in your business, that is absolutely your fault, because you're tolerating that person. And actually, in terms of industries and sectors, farming is really tolerant when it comes to people, extraordinarily tolerant. You wouldn't give a cow a second chance, possibly. You get rid of the barren cow or whatever, but Asher, I'll give him another chance. Asher, he might improve, he's only a young lad. That's fine if you've got a lot of absorbency in your system, but when you're talking about, as Mike Murphy spoke about this morning, really getting those costs down, you can't have that kind of tolerance, because it has to be business at the end of the day. And what happens when you tolerate somebody like that, you're rewarding that person and you're punishing everybody else. You're putting a huge amount of stress on the system that everybody else has to deal with. So for people currently working with people that aren't working well for you, you need to first of all go back and revise, what am I doing wrong that's creating that? And then you need to secondly revise, is this the right person for my business, and should I be looking at creating an exit strategy for that person? Okay. In terms of what does the employee want? So what is it that a potential employee might want from you? How could you motivate that person? How can you generate interest in that person? And communication is absolutely critical. And that's the same in any aspect of business. Communication is the key word. If you're talking about property, it's location. If you're talking about people management, it is absolutely about communication. Why not ask people when they come in the gate to you, why did you pick me? Why on earth would you be interested in working in my business? The people who already work for you, why do they work for you? What is it that they like about your business? And remember, this is high risk. If you ask people what they like or don't like about you, they may tell you things you don't want to hear. Okay? If you ask somebody's opinion and they tell you the truth and it's not very nice, you cannot punish them for that. That's absolutely critical. Okay? You cannot punish somebody for their opinion if you asked it. So make sure you're in a good state of mind before you open yourself up to a personal assassination. Okay, so this is really, really important. What does the employee want? Because if you can get your head around that, you can generate a serious amount of commitment from your employee very, very quickly. And that's where motivation comes in as well. So why does the candidate apply to you? There are many other jobs. You put a job description in the newspapers or wherever it is you put it. There are other people looking for people as well. Why do they come in the door to you? Again, can you offer what they're looking for? If not now, when? So what offers, what promises can you make that add value to you? And in terms of the exit interview, that's really, really critical. If people are leaving your business, hopefully not wholesale, hopefully you're not hemorrhaging people, because if you're hemorrhaging people, you're really not doing well as an employer. In terms of exiting interview, why are they leaving? And for most people, it'll be maybe they've got somewhere else to go in terms of they're returning to a family farm, or maybe they're the New Zealand is going back home and the pull of home, etc., and maybe the bad weather. Maybe it's distance from the farm that they're working on and they don't have a family support or community. So it's really important that you find out what it is that is causing people to leave your business and that you take that information with you and that you do something with it. So there's no real problems unless you keep repeating the same mistake. So in terms of managing people, most people are very tolerable. They'll take a little bit of abuse from you, but if you consistently do it and are not learning from your mistakes, well then that's definitely you messing up. In terms of communication and understanding people, I think it's really interesting from a sector-specific concept that if you deal with animals, you're in a much better position to understand how to deal with people than people who don't deal with animals. And one of the reasons I say that is that in terms of walking into the parlour and screaming and shouting, you know that milk productivity drops. You know that if you're causing stress to animals, you're opening them all up to potential disease and to poor performance. And actually, that's the exact same when we're looking at communication and dealing with the people that you already work with. People will also perform poorly if you're screaming and shouting at them, if you're not thinking about what it is they want. So actually, as a sector, as an industry, farming community is in quite a healthy place in terms of taking on employees. So as scary as it sounds for many people when they think about taking on employees and they'd much rather deal with the animals or with the tractors, actually dealing with people is a skill set that you already have, just it needs to be transferred from your handling of animals. In terms of the whole idea of dealing with people, you might listen to somebody like Colin Glass talking about a big operation, but in truth, a large organisation is just made up of several individuals and the interactions of several individuals. So you're just scaling up the concept of people when you look at a larger organisation. So everything that Colin can speak about later, or is going to speak about later, is absolutely relevant to your role, even if you're a one-man band. So even if you're a one-man band, you still have to interact with your vet, with your bank manager. I know the Brewers talked about the bank manager being a member of their team. That's a really valuable way to look at it. You still have to be able to facilitate and motivate and get that individual to be committed to your business concept. So it's really important that you understand that communication isn't a million miles away from how you handle the animals that you're working with every day. That taking your time, giving people a chance to learn, giving people a chance, the opportunity to find out and find their footing makes it a lot easier than hammering people all the time and battering them, just like animals don't respond particularly well over time to be beaten around the place. So it's a really interesting concept from an employment point of view, that people in this room are in a far better place to employ people than you might believe from the outside. Okay? It is not a black art, it is a totally learnable skill that people should be feeling is probably easier than some of the complicated stuff we heard today in terms of disease management, or, if you take the time to observe the people that you work with, you'll probably guess what they're up to within reason at any one time. If you've no idea what your employees are doing or what they're about, that is absolutely your fault, and you're not taking the time to understand them, okay? How can we fail? Well, this is the critical one, and this is also the critical one in terms of the difficulty in defining what is trust and what is respect. because they're those kind of intangible concepts that we know can collapse entire businesses, and yet people find it very difficult to articulate what it means. So in terms of trust and respect, it's about having that consistency. It's about having that commitment to the things that you have identified, that you've maybe promised to your employees, or in terms of the trust aspect is that they know if you want somebody to do extra work for you, you have to have a big bank of trust banked up. You have to have a big reserve of trust. So when things do go wrong and you get these scenarios such as the brewers described, where they had to ask people to do a lot of extra work in terms of health management for their cows, when you've got a crisis such as Colin described, and he's now asking people, the earth movers to become to work with the irrigation, you have to have a lot of trust banked in order to ask people to follow you blind. And it's really critical that you create that trust through honouring your promises, respecting the individual's differences, understanding that while you might know everything there is about farming, other people will have a different learning level, and that you've got to have tolerance for that. And it's all of those kind of concepts that if you were treated like that, you'd feel good about yourself. To some extent, it comes back to those kind of basic Christian values where you feel to be treated, to be treated as I'd like other people to treat me. So it's really thinking about it from that point of view, and understanding the motivations, fears, emotions of the other person makes it much easier to deal and interact with that person. But that first and foremost comes from conquering self. Okay? Lack of role clarity, I mentioned that. That's the key killer in most organizations. Somebody's brought in to be an employee and find out that it's completely different to what they expect it to be. I don't know why I get up in the morning. I don't actually know why we're doing all this testing. I don't know why I'm measuring grass. I'm just told to measure grass. If I know what it contributes towards, it makes it much easier for me to buy into it. So creating commitment is and motivating people, you've got to get that role clarity down. Colin referred to keeping things simple. He's got somebody honest on the board who keeps it simple and back to basics. That's clarity. Simple and back to basics. That is creating clarity so people know where they stand. It's a very particular mindset that can operate in a vacuum of not knowing the direction you're going in. Poor communication, obviously, shouting and screaming at people, or not communicating at all, and then punishing the person for not doing the job you never told them to do. Okay, that's a really big one in the workplace. Not clarifying how a job should be done and then punishing the person for not doing it the way you expected it to be done. This is a huge challenge for the farming community, for people who aren't used to working with other people. How do you get all that information? You need to be able to articulate that. Just because you know every single thing about your milking parlour and you do it on automatic pilot at whatever hour of the morning does not mean that the next person is going to pick it up as quickly as you do. So you need to get very good at articulating how you get your work across, what it is you expect from somebody to do every day, and even if it's mind-blowingly obvious to you, you've got to accept that it may not be for the next person. And if somebody goes wrong and does something wrong, the first point of call should be back to yourself. What did I do that created that inappropriate behaviour or that poor behaviour in the other person? So we have that internal feedback loop that is always me. How could I be better? What did I do wrong? If within reason you've given everything you possibly can to that individual, you've explained it well, you've explained it several times and they're still not getting it, then you can maybe revise whether that person is the right person to have in your business, whether you're giving the right task to that individual or should you be giving it to somebody else. But firstly, it should come back to you. The unrealistic expectations, and that's like expecting people to be as committed as you are to your own business. That's an unrealistic expectation. Many people go to work to pay the bills. That's a reality. Many people go to work for a quiet life, getting away from home, okay? So it's about having those unrealistic expectations and maybe toning down a little bit and accepting that other people haven't the vested interest that you have. Unrealistic expectations can lead to stuff like micromanaging, so standing over the shoulder of somebody and insisting that you watch everything they do, maybe interfering. That's bad economic sense in the sense of you're paying somebody else to do a job and you're doing it, you're now effectively paying two people to do it. So if you employ somebody to do a job, let them do their job. Okay? Do not micromanage. That's very typical in homegrown business where somebody's been used to being in control of everything and struggle to let go of that kind of hands-on approach. The more you expand, the less control you have over everything. Okay? And I like that Colin talked about being control freaks. It's really important that you have the right people in control to be control freaks. One person will become a huge blockage if they insist on controlling everything. So you have to have the right people in place, and it is critical from your point of view that you are not the control freak, because you'll never manage to do the things that John Roach spoke about earlier, and having the opportunity to go on holidays, or getting the opportunity to leave the business. If you are critical to your business, absolutely critical to your business, you're indispensable, which means you can't take time off, you can't enjoy the earnings of working hard because you're so critical to the business. The ultimate in leadership is to become obsolete. So you should be moving towards a state of working where you have the opportunity to go to the Positive Farmers Conference without worrying about the fact that the world is collapsing behind you. If it is, you're managing and leading poorly. And that's a reflection back to yourself. And that's about efficiencies. And everything that Mike Murphy spoke about this morning in terms of, what direction will you choose, and he's got a very nice poster up on the wall, that has to include you as an individual as well. That has to include you as where are you investing in yourself. Equally, laissez-faire management, which is just literally abdicating responsibility. That's a really detrimental thing to do to your business if you do not have the right person there. You won't have the right person there if you don't understand what it is you want from the people. Reneging on promises, offering something and not giving it, that really upsets everybody, never mind employees. How frustrating it is when somebody says they'll offer you something and they don't. And lack of recognition. I was in the UK at the beginning of the week working with the Federation of Building Merchants, and about 80% of the group I was speaking to had come from the nationals, like Kingfisher and Saint-Gobain, those kind of people, so B&Q. And the main reason they cited from leaving those business and going to private companies was lack of recognition. That they felt they were only a cog in a huge system and they had a lack of recognition. That's 80% of a group of 30 people who said not being recognized was the key reason they left the business they were in. I had a chat at lunchtime and we pointed out that maybe there's a cultural problem there in terms of Ireland, because if you praise somebody, they might get a bit above themselves. They might get notions, and I'll give them a little bit of a compliment, but not too much. That sounds, good on paper, but I can guarantee you, if you don't recognize people's good work, they'll go to somebody who does. So it's really, really important. Lack of recognition, by the way, could be the simple things like investing in your employees. A lot of people say, I'm not going to invest in my employees. They'll leave. They'll walk out the door. If I give them training, that makes them more, that makes them more attractive to other employees, and they'll walk out the door. From my experience across many sectors, it is far more likely that people will walk out the door because you didn't invest in them than if you do invest in them. And there's a theory of reciprocity which says that people feel beholden to people who give them something. So actually, if you invest and take the time to develop your employees, they do feel a sense of obligation to you and your business. That's well worth remembering. Okay? Being, of course, dishonest or disloyal is obviously going to cause a lot of issues in any walk of life, never mind agriculture. And I think there's not many of you maybe can't see it, but there's a point there just in the thought bubble that the employee can contribute to the failure of the working relationship in many ways. Okay, many ways, being stupid, not committing, being unreliable. But actually, for the most part, the fault typically lies with the employer. And that's a sobering fact. So it's about reflecting back on yourself in this time of expansion. Do you need to have more employees, firstly, or could you just be more efficient as an individual? And secondly, what is it that you can do, and how can you be the best employer possible? And that's absolutely critical to reflect on that. In terms of how we can succeed, let's just put all those slides together. There's key points in every one of those slides. And every one of those slides is talking about, certain aspects that you can take away and use. So role clarity, critical. Don't just get some young lad in the door to do a bit of work. Define exactly what a bit of work looks like. Know where that person will be and what they're doing and what's expected of them. Create clarity. Get the business right. Know where you are at any one time so that you know what to do with your employees at any one time. Add value. Everybody expects a minimum in terms of pay. They'll get that across many industries. So where can you add value in your business that makes you more attractive than the next comparable proposition? Communication, communication, communication. Take the time to speak to the people who work with you. Don't assume that they have the same values as you. Sit down and ask them, what do you want from the job? Where are we now? It's January. They know there's a tough time coming up. How can you make that easier for them in terms of calving? What is it that they want in a year's time? What do they want to achieve? What do they want in 5 years' time? Ask the questions. Do not assume for a minute that they will volunteer that information. You ask it, you find out about it, and you use it to your advantage as leverage to create a better working relationship and to develop commitment in your employees. And that in turn develops trust and respect in the relationship, because people think, well, here's somebody who's actually asking me what I want and what I expect, and not only that, they're fulfilling it, I trust this person, and when they ask me to do something I mightn't like to do, I'll be more willing to do it because I feel that this person has my back. And I think the critical thing in any leadership scenario, any management scenario, any individual, but critically when you're looking after other people, is this concept of continuous self-reflection. What are you doing and what can you do better? Many people in the busy world that we live in, bombarded by a lot of information, say they do not have time for self-reflection. Farming is a good example of somewhere you can self-reflect. You've got, time spent in the milking parlour, time driving machinery. You have the opportunity to think about yourself and to reflect. Self-evaluation, how are you doing? How could you be doing better? Lots of examples of evaluation today. How are you evaluating yourself against the other farmers? I think discussion groups are a great idea. And self-development on the part of the employer. So I guess when we talk a lot today, or I was asked to speak about motivating people, one of the critical ways about motivating people is by understanding yourself, what it is you want, and then you're in a position to offer an attractive package that you can fulfill on because you weren't just making it up there on the spot. You actually genuinely understand your business and what it is you require from every element of it. And don't forget for a second that while all of the things that you're talking about, the importance of cows, the importance of land, the importance of soil, none of that happens without people. People is a huge, it's a massive factor, and in Western society is absolutely the limiting factor. You need to make yourselves as attractive as possible in order for you to get the best person in the gate. The best person will not come in the gate unless you are the best employer. Okay? That's it.